A man named George Parker sold the Brooklyn Bridge more than 5 times to different buyers. But here's the crazy part. George Parker didn't even own the Brooklyn Bridge. That's right, he scammed a lot of people out of a lot of money. They didn't even know it was a con until the police stopped them from putting up their own toll booth on the bridge. And that wasn't the only famous attraction that George Parker sold. For several years in the early 1900s, he sold lots of New York's most famous places. He sold Madison Square Garden, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, even the Statue of Liberty. And he didn't own any of those either. Parker was finally caught for his scams after many years, and that's when he became so famous that he inspired a popular expression. For many years, if someone was considered gullible, they might hear the expression, "If you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you." Now you might be thinking to yourself, yeah, but that was a long time ago. Those kinds of property scams wouldn't happen today. Well, guess what? You can't buy the Brooklyn Bridge anymore, but there are plenty of weird property scams. For example, did you know that you can buy land on the moon? There's a company called the Lunar Registry that sells lunar property by the acre. You can get land in the Sea of Tranquility for about $37 an acre. Or, if you want a pricier piece of property, the Ocean of Storms is about $50 per acre. And they really make it look official. When you buy land on the moon, they give you a whole property documents package. You get a deed for the property and a satellite photograph that shows your purchase from space. Your purchase includes complimentary member citizenship in the United Lunar Republic. They even give you a Lunar Republic flag to fly on your car. And don't forget the boarding pass for Fly Translunar. It shows the moon as the destination for your trip. Now there's only one problem. None of that is legal or accurate. In fact, it's not legal for anyone to own any part of the moon. Not an individual and not a country. That's because of the Outer Space Treaty. It was written in the late 1960s, and Article 2 says this about lunar ownership. Outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies, is not subject to national appropriation by claim of sovereignty, by means of use or occupation, or by any other means. Now, that was agreed to by the United Nations. That basically means nobody can own the moon, so buyer beware. And if that's true of the moon, then it's also true of the stars, which means you don't want to get fooled by the International Star Registry. And if you're wondering what that is, it's exactly what you think. It's a place online where you can pay $59 for a custom star kit. That's right, they let you choose a star from one of the many available stars. You can pay them your $60 and you get to name it. They send you a certificate of record and a star chart with your star marked on it. And they also throw in a book about astronomy. But just like the moon, you're not really buying anything. Thankfully, this company's website makes that clear. You're not buying a star, you're just naming a star for someone special. But technically, you're not really doing that either. You're just paying for a certificate that says you named a star. The star isn't legally named anything because the certificate isn't legally binding. But let's come back down from space and talk about some crazy property purchases right here on Earth. Let's talk about the ocean. Almost 70% of our planet is covered by oceans, and oceans are water, which is a liquid that moves and can't be divided up. So there's no way you could just buy part of the ocean, right? Wrong. In fact, a man in China did it to apologize to his girlfriend for forgetting Valentine's Day. Back in 2019, a Chinese man was looking for a way to make up for forgetting to get his girlfriend a gift. And that's when he found out about an auction that was taking place. Guess what they were selling? It turns out that there was a 2 million square foot section of ocean off the coast of China that was up for sale. The previous owners were a fish farming company, and guess how much it sold for? $142,000. Now that's some serious money for a chunk of water that doesn't even take up a whole mile. But the real question is, was it legally binding? Well, the answer is, surprisingly, yes. Here's what I mean. Technically, territorial waters belong to the country and can't be bought or sold. But the same is not true of usage rights. Usage rights are the rights that say the owner is the only one who can use the water. Now, what does that mean exactly? Well, not much to that man's girlfriend, who's the current owner, but usually it means that a fish farm would be the only place that could fish there. And for now, it means that this man's girlfriend is the only one who can use this chunk of water. And as far as romantic gestures go, I think it's a pretty good one. Who doesn't want to own a piece of the ocean? Okay, so we've talked about the air and we've talked about the water. Let's talk about some of the most interesting land scams. The first one isn't really a scam as much as it is a confusing name. That's right, I'm talking about the Adopt a Highway program. You've probably heard of this. A group of people, often a business or nonprofit organization, can adopt 2 miles of road for 2 years. That section of road then becomes their responsibility to keep clean. That means going out to pick up litter at least 4 times each year. In exchange for doing that, the Department of Transportation thanks you, and they do it by putting up signs on the road with your company's name. Now, it's actually a great program, but is it really adoption? When you adopt a child or even a puppy, you have to pay money and follow guidelines. And when you adopt a child, you become their caregiver and parent. You make important life decisions for them. And what do you do for the road? Certainly not any important life decisions. And you definitely don't get any special benefits from adopting the road, unless you count the fact that you keep the cans and bottles that you find. I guess you can exchange them for recycling money. Well, now that I think about it, when you adopt a road, it costs you time and effort, and the work is never done. It's thankless, aside from one tiny sign at the beginning and the end, and when it's over, the road goes on in life without you. I guess it is like having a child. Anyway, moving on to an even crazier kind of property scam. Forget about adopting land, let's talk about owning it. Specifically owning 1 square foot of land in England, Scotland, or Ireland. Why would you do that? It's so you can attain the title of Lord. Yes, the term Lord used to apply to people who were landowners in the United Kingdom. There were only 3 ways to become a lord back then. Purchase land owned by a lord and have the title bestowed on you, marry someone who inherited the land, or have the title bestowed on you by the House of Commons. Now those rules don't really apply today, but there are still places who will sell you a very small piece of land in Scotland that comes with a title of lordship. And they're not very expensive either. You can get a lordship or a ladyship for about $55. The question is, what does the title of lord get you? Well, the answer is short and easy. Nothing. All it gets you is the ability to call yourself Lord. But just like all the others, the question is, does it hold up legally? And unfortunately, the answer is the same as most of the others. No. Buying land in Scotland doesn't make you a lord. In 2016, the Guardian newspaper looked into this claim. They asked the Court of the Lord Lion, who is the official authority in Scotland. They said that titles bought online have no legal status. Well, this is a bummer. You can't buy land on the moon, you can't own a star, you can't really own the ocean, you're not really getting anything when you adopt a highway, and you can't become a lord from owning land in Scotland. Aren't there any land scams that actually do hold up legally? Well, since you asked, yes, there is one kind of land ownership that is kind of a scam, and it does actually work. It's called squatting. You've probably heard this term before. Most people think squatting is going into someone else's property and just staying, but that's not exactly true. For example, a person who moves into an apartment and then doesn't pay his rent, he's not a squatter. He's just delinquent on his bills and he can be kicked out. Squatting is something different. Squatting happens when someone lays claim to a property they've lived on for a long time. For example, in the state of Florida, they must live on the property for 7 years. In Kentucky, it has to be 15 years. But there can be other factors too, depending on the state. Let's use Florida for example, since they're right in the middle with the rules. Now first, the properties are usually abandoned or foreclosed. Generally, the building is just unoccupied. Second, the squatter has to actually be a resident for that whole time. A squatter can't claim property if they don't live there or if they're there only occasionally. It has to be their primary residence. Third, they can't be sharing the property with others. If there are other squatters, then they can't claim possession of the property for just themselves. Fourth, it has to be open and public that they're living there. The squatter can't be living in the property secretly. It must be an easily observable fact that they live there. And finally, they must be paying property taxes the entire time they've lived there. If they haven't, then they're not eligible. Now, there can be other potential requirements as well, such as upkeep of the property. They want to see that you've maintained the yard and home, things like that. However, if all those things are true, then a squatter can claim possession of a property. The legal term is called adverse possession. The idea of squatting can be controversial, depending on who you ask. And one of the reasons for that is because it is in fact legal to do. There is a clear process, and if you follow it, squatting is a perfectly legal act. I think that's the most interesting thing we've learned today. All the other things we discussed are mostly not true, not legal, or not accurate. But squatting, the one most people think is criminal or trespassing, is actually legal. And that's just the weird, wild world of the law for you. Thanks for watching No Way That's Legal. We'll see you next time.